Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Amy Canavan. You've been a Monday staple, Amy, for some time on the Acsom Bulletin, and you're back, and we're in the midst of the pre-season, but there is loads to talk about in the world of Celtic. And before anybody says, oh, we've already lost a couple of big names in Beaton and Rogic, that's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about assets you would rather keep, but they've been sold for big money. And I was having a wee look at that actually. And we'll start off with that, Amy. I was having a look at that this morning. How big a part of that do you think is down to Ange? I'm going to read through the seasons, the five seasons. The last time we went through an entire campaign without selling one of our big assets, big names, was in Brendan Rodgers' second season, 2017-18. In 2018-19, we lost Stuart Armstrong to Southampton and Moussa Dembele to Lyon. The following season, Dedrick Boyata to Hertha Berlin and Kieran Tierney to Arsenal. Season after that, Jeremy Frimpong to Bayer Leverkusen. And then last pre-season, it was Chris Ayer, Ryan Christie and Odsonne Edouard. So 5 years on the bounce, we've lost big names. This year, it would be an absolute shock if one of our big names was to leave. How big a part has Ange played in that, do you think?
I think Ange securing Champions League football's played everything in it, in all honesty. I think they both kind of go hand in hand in that aspect, and you can't take that away. How many of these guys elsewhere are going to walk into a starting Champions League group stage side? That's not easy. So to have that kind of guarantee, it shows already that how imperative it is to keep that kind of standard going, and obviously winning the league is paramount. But what also comes with that is, like you say, a relatively stress-free transfer window. So well, I think the summer's quite. I know it's hard because it's not almost. It has started, but it's not started. It's still very early days. But so far, there's no real tenseness or worry, angst, anything like that. I think there's an awful lot of sadness still, especially I think with Tom Rogic for me anyway. But as you say, going for the kind of the big money move, and you're thinking, right, who's going to maybe come in for X, Y, or Z? I don't think any of those kind of nerves have really struck yet. And as you say, this time last season, we were definitely all thinking Edward, matter of time, Christie, matter of time, and Ayer. Because Ayer at this point, I think you were still going, right, if he stays, the only thing that can maybe make him stay if he was made captain or something like that. But in truth, I don't really think that was ever really an option. I think he always was going as well. So, I think it's just nice actually to have a relatively calm June. There's not been. It's just everything's just so nonchalant, and it's great. Like I know we're joking that like Jota's been on more holidays than Natasha, but you're just having.
Almost.
Oh well, almost. That's quite the record between them both. But yeah, just like not having to worry about qualifiers and not having to worry about those big money moves. Everything's just probably as champions, what you deserve. In all honesty, I think we've touched on it so many times how much of a disgrace it is how little a break Celtic get usually. Because you're going up to the cup final, and then, well, mostly certainly in recent years, and then you're back again in a matter of weeks for qualifiers. So just that stability that's kind of kicking around, I think, right now, other than Jota, which still remains, I think every few days there's it's close, it's close. It's got to be close. I don't know how many more folk can break it as an exclusive that it's close. But if he gets secured, then I think you're looking at rightly one of the most stable summers and I know you're saying 5 years since we've lost a big name, but I don't know how long that's been then since pretty much other than Tom Rogic and Beaton really losing anyone of note, really.
Well, the thing with that is, and I've always kind of came back to this, is having a strategy where you can keep a group of players together, Amy, for that wee bit longer than the kind of 3 years that we tend to have a cycle on a player coming in. You look at the classic example, some of the names that we've mentioned here, Dembele, for example, Frimpong, Boyata, where you bring them in to sell them on. I mean, that's the whole purpose. Yeah, you get your benefit of having the player whilst they're there, but you're developing them and they're getting on a bigger stage so that they can get the big money move. And always, I mean, even if you look at that, how many players was that I read out there? 5, 6, 7, that's 8 players in the last 5 years that we have lost, mainly to big money. I know Boyata ended up going on a free, but we had a £9 million bid knocked back for Boyata the previous January. You remember the banner coming out when he played, and he wasn't the fans' favourite. And then he scored a winning goal, I think, at Celtic Park, and that was all forgotten. But there's 8 players who are still active, in their prime perhaps even, that if you put them all together in the same team, we've got a frightening team. And you do have that aspect of it. And I know that's fantasy football, but what I'm trying to say is, if Ange has that effect on the club and on the players, and yeah, the Champions League qualification's a massive part of that, and you're able to keep them in together as that kind of nucleus for the next 3 or 4 years, that's the kind of quality that you'll be looking at in 3 or 4 years, because that's just been in the last 5 years, 8 players that have moved on, that had they been still at the club, Amy, the team that you would have would be, frightening. You'd be looking at them doing something. I'm not going to say for a minute they're going to win a European trophy, but you certainly would be looking for progress with that litany of talent. And you're kind of hoping that Ange has that effect on the board, on the players that he's working with day to day. Like you said, Tommy Rogic has left the building. He's 29 years of age. I've been having a look at some of the players that have left at the moment. The last that I've seen in terms of interest for him was from Persija Jakarta in Indonesia. Sounds a bit like a semi-retirement move for Tommy Rogic. But I did go back to one of the conversations that Ange had, where he said that, his entire adult life has been spent in Scotland, away from home. And obviously, he's maybe not looking for a big move, or he maybe doesn't have ambitions, Amy, to do something in European football, even at international level. So it would surprise me a little bit, but I get it. I get why he would make a move. Nir Bitton, 30 years of age, last I heard was interest from Maccabi Tel Aviv. And then you've got guys like Ewan Henderson, we knew, 22 years of age. He was on his way to Hibs. Barkas, season-long loan deal to Utrecht, thankfully. We've also heard a lot about Kerr McInroy. After a few decent spells out on loan, he's managed to get a move to Kilmarnock. Good move for the boy. Luca Connell, Colin Watts drew me that 25 quid. He did not make a first-team appearance. Colin, if you're watching, the £25 hasn't landed in St Mary's bank account yet, mate. Dembele, apparently, has got interest, age 19, from Serie A. And I'm looking at that group of players, and you're thinking, maybe Rogic, maybe Bitton, the rest of them, it's just normal, staff rotation in many ways, and you expect that kind of list of players to come and go at a club like Celtic. But it is refreshing, as you say, that we're in a pre-season. We're not worrying about qualifiers. We're not worrying about the big name player leaving the club. And by the way, the 3 that left, in Christy Ayer and Edouard, as you know, I was a big fan of Chris Ayer, but it was time for him to go. He wanted out. Edouard, it seems, had checked out. Christy was the one I'm kind of disappointed in, simply because I think he would have suited what Ange was doing. But yeah, that's all in the past. I want to talk a wee bit, though, about one of the players that was on that list, Kieran Tierney, Amy. And I know that you have a vast knowledge not only of Celtic, but you follow football elsewhere, and you keep a keen eye on the English game. When I seen the news in the last couple of days that Tierney has apparent interest from Man City, I found it quite interesting because of the transfer fee. And I remember a show that I did with Kev Graham around about the time when Tierney was kind of on the move. We knew he was the next in line, like we've just spoken about, to be leaving the building. And we had this discussion, how far can he go? How far can Kieran Tierney go? Well, let me tell you this much. If he was to go for the reported 50 million quid, there is one thing. He would be the most expensive Scottish footballer of all time. And I was having a wee look at this morning, Amy, because I know that I've mentioned Oliver Burke a few times, right? There should probably be an Oliver Burke Clarkson. But I was thinking, who are the top 5 in combined fees? So if you look at Tierney sitting at 25 million quid at the moment, right? As far as I know, please correct me in the comments if I've forgotten anybody, I think he's number 4. You've got, underneath him, Stephen Fletcher. Combined transfer fees, 24.39 million quid. That's frightening.
Yep, that was the one that came first to mind. Just because you're thinking how many moves.
Big moves. Aye. Yep. Big moves. But here's an interesting one. Duncan Ferguson, £25.47 million in transfer fees. And that was a while ago.
I was just going to say, you're thinking back in the day, back at that time as well, though. That's huge.
Massive fees.
That
There was the big one. I think the big one was Everton to Newcastle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
About £9 million or something like that. And then Jordan Rhodes, £31.23 million.
Jeez, oh wow.
The second most expensive Scottish footballer of all time. And number one, of course, is your man, Oliver Burke, 33.21. So it would be great for Kieran Tierney to move so that he can be the most expensive Scottish footballer of all time. But my big question, I guess, would be, I know you've been watching his progress, but do you think he'll follow in the footsteps of someone like Virgil van Dijk, where he reaches the pinnacle of European football, he wins the big cup, the cup with the big ears? Do you think he's capable of doing that? And is Man City the club for him if he wants to do that?
I don't want to go to Man City though. I'm not a fan of Man City at all. I don't know. You just, get to throw money at anything and everyone. But in saying that, if he wants to win it, it's probably the place to go. If they can throw the money, I think it's been reported about 375 grand a week for Haaland. That's just absolutely insane. It's pretty disgusting, to be honest with you. So if maybe that is probably where he sees, because if City don't win the Champions League next year, then I think there's something really wrong. I think it proves that you can't buy it, though. I think PSG have been trying that probably for the best part of about 7 years now, and they've still, pretty much came nowhere near. Of course, Kieran Tierney can win it, though. I just certainly hope that it's not with Man City. I really don't. But he can pretty much play anywhere across Europe. It's his style of play, We see even at Scotland that he can play in that back three and still get so far forward. It's unbelievable. The inverted fullback, just your bog standard kind of left back as well. He can really do it all. So I think his attitude as well. The biggest thing Kieran Tierney, we knew when he was at Celtic, was always just going to be how injury-free can he stay. And I think, to be honest, if he hadn't had the injuries that he's had at Arsenal, he'd probably moved on by now anyway. Because at least when he went down, I think a lot of us thought he was still too good for that kind of Arsenal side. And I think that's shown through in recent years. When he does go on a run, he's by far and wide probably one of their best players, even though he may not be the most expensive at that time. But there was a lot of underperformance in that Arsenal side. I think that he can pretty much play anywhere, any club that wanted him. I think the Real Madrid rumours went a little bit quieter in recent weeks, as you say, as the City ones have ramped up. But no surprise at all that he's getting, offers or figures and transfer talks going around left, right and centre, because this is a guy that can pretty much play, I would say, anywhere.
And I'm pretty sure if he does win the European Cup with any of the clubs you've mentioned there, that he's probably wearing a pair of Celtic shin guards, whoever he's playing for. And of course, Celtic will benefit if he gets the big move, because we have had that habit of putting in the sell-on clause. I mean, most of the players, not all, but most of the players that I mentioned there, the 8 players over the last 5 years, there's quite a few of them with sell-on clauses in their deal. Frimpong, for example, Dembele, Ryan Christie, Chris Ayer, Edouard, and of course Kieran Tierney. So there's a lot of money coming Celtic's way because they've had that kind of foresight to, it's part and parcel of a big deal these days, isn't it, to get the sell on. I mean, we've got it, having brought in Carter Vickers. I'm sure it'll be the same if we do the Jota deal, which we'll be talking about at some point during the show as well. But Kieran Tierney will be keeping a wee eye on that. And I always remember, again, trying to remember who we were playing, and Tierney was left back, Ralston was right back. And you were kind of watching it going, we've got 2 decent fullbacks coming through. And then their careers just went in completely opposite directions. You know what I mean? So that was me just taking the opportunity to mention Tony Ralston again, because I know you were a founding member of the Tony Ralston fan club. We've got a wee poll running on YouTube. We are only going out on YouTube today. I'm going to run that for a week to see how it goes, because up until now, in order to raise the awareness of a Celtic State of Mind, we've been going out on every platform you can imagine, including Twitch, Amy, whatever that is.
Whatever that is, you and both.
I thought to myself, let's go exclusively on YouTube. Let's get the community all into one place. We are running a poll at the moment. You know how much I love the old Celtic jerseys and Celtic's new home shirt. There has been quite a few leaked images Is it? Is it not? Who knows? And I've asked the question, are you a fan of the supposed new home jersey? We'll come back to that in a second. But at the moment, yes is 48%. So it's completely dividing opinion, but we'll come back to that. Let's bring up some of your comments. Michael McDonald, welcome back to the show. You are, of course, commenting on YouTube. I am gutted and shocked that we're letting an opportunity to release a classic Celtic Adidas line slip through our fingers. Talk about a win-win. I remember when I was doing a lot of the kind of research on the Celtic jerseys, asking the old collectors, I'm not saying they're old, well, I did just say that because most of them are old, asking the old collectors, Amy, who would you love to make Celtic's jerseys? Because we had this association with Umbro for about 70 years, right? And then we had Nike and New Balance. And there was always that thing, you'd love to see, the classic Adidas templates. But of course, the problem is the classic Adidas templates were back in the day. And I don't know which ones you're referring to, Michael, but I'm going to bring up a couple that I think, or one at least that I think was a classic template. And I remember saying this before, and I'm not sure if you would agree with this or not, but I remember the old Adidas kits that they used to make for Queen's Park Rangers, for example, right?
Yeah.
So this one here. And I know that Guinness isn't everyone's cup of tea, but that there, I think if you've got...
approve.
Declan likes a pint of Guinness, yes. And you would need to have more. You'd need to have more hoops than that. But I think that what you've got there is you've got a classic Adidas template from about 1985, 86. In fact, it would be about 86 because Celtic had a similar jersey in terms of the collar and all that, but it was an Umbro one. You'd need to have the hoops on the sleeves. Is that the kind of template you're talking about, Michael? Let us know, because that is one that I've got to say I am a big fan of that particular template. We do like to talk about everything involving Celtic, so the jerseys are a big part of that, particularly in the pre-season. BAC, we should go for the Japanese brand Mizuno. Can you even remember Mizuno, Amy?
I can't. I know I'm familiar with it, but I don't think that I can remember it. No, like I've seen it since, obviously.
I remember it. I think it might have been, well, in the UK anyway, BAC, correct me if I'm wrong, 1990s it became a thing. It was a brand. I remember there was quite a lot of brands coming into the UK, like LA Gear and all that kind of stuff, right? So you had your Reebok pumps and everything. Didn't get me started on retro trainers, man. Travel Fox, Troop, Champion, oh yeah, British Knights, SPX. So Mizuno were kicking around about that time, and I do remember them, and they moved into the football boot market as well. Do they still exist? I'm sure they did make football kits for a while. Michael McDonald, the new top is cool, but it needs a collar, 3 stripes from the neck to the wrist, and obviously the classic logo. Again, interestingly enough, because we do a lot of content that is non-Celtic related, Amy, we were talking to a brand designer who works for Meba down in London. They're a Spanish brand, and he was telling me that they'd had that discussion with the Adidas kit makers about why don't you go for the 3 stripes down the sleeves? Why don't you go for the trefoil, the old classic Adidas badge? But they're dead against it. They reckon it will never return whilst those in charge are still at Adidas. Which is a bit of a shame, because I'm a bit of a traditionalist, a wee bit like Michael by the sounds of it, and I would love to see a return to the old Celtic jerseys. Now, for me, a Celtic home jersey should have at least 6 green hoops, Amy. Now I'm getting into the anorak stage, right? So the one I've seen, I think's only got 5.
I did that earlier, to be fair, actually. I did as well.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's missing a hoop.
I know we'll come on to it, but I don't like it. I don't.
Let's bring it up. Right? So there's
go.
been a linked picture. Some eagle-eyed viewer has said that this has been taken at Celtic Park because that is a Celtic Park lounge carpet. Nothing gets past the eagle eyes out online. But yes, it does look as though, if I remove Michael's comment, that there is a Celtic carpet.
Is there not another one about there now, actually?
I seen one on the tiled floor.
Yeah, they see what I saw that one as well. Because if that's the one that's lying flat down, that's kind of been doing the rounds this morning. I'll be honest, I don't like either. I really don't like the silver, the tricolour, well, not the tricolour, but the 3 stripes. Not a tricolour at all. That's the point.
It would be better if it was a tricolour. Yeah, absolutely.
If it was the tricolour. That was these 3 silver here. I don't like that at all. Like I really, really don't. I don't mind the V-neck, but on a home strip, I'm not so sure with the hoops. And I'm right now, because I was just all in my head today has been the other one that I've seen floating around. I don't actually know which one I prefer and which one is. Yeah, I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of either. And I think going back to what you said earlier, I just think I've been pretty disappointed with Adidas as a whole on the home strips, because I think, as you rightly said, I remember even when I was younger, like 11, 12 or whatever, and I was like speaking to my uncle, and we were thinking how great it would be at that time. We were going, oh, I just want Adidas. And then New Balance, we even had New Balance before Adidas, and just thinking what Adidas would be able to do with it. And I just think in the home strips have just not really hit the nail on the head yet. Like, I'm a big fan of this away strip, absolutely. And like, no shock, absolutely the sponsorless away strip, and probably it'll be sponsorless home as well, because I just think the alphabet's absolutely huge. But I just don't think that I don't know if they're trying to be too quirky with the home. Just keep it. And I'm speaking to the expert here, but I think the simpler you keep it, I think the more impactful it is.
Definitely. Less is more when it comes to
Yeah.
Celtic jerseys. And I think there's a few templates back in the day, maybe going back to what Michael was saying, where we could just use an old Adidas template and it would work an absolute treat. Remember the Liverpool away jerseys back in the 1990s? I'll bring one of them up actually, but they were superb Adidas templates, and I'm pretty sure that we could bring one of them. It does bring back memories of the likes of John Barnes as a player, but let's not get him mixed up with John Barnes as the manager. It's this kind of thing, right? So that would work as an away jersey. I mean, the 3 stripes on the shoulder
Yeah, I
and
like
all that kind of stuff, that would work an absolute treat. But yes, we are obviously at a stage where whatever the design is, it's been decided and it's not going to change now, Amy, regardless of what we say on a Celtic State of Mind or elsewhere. But yes, that seems to be the feedback on the away jersey. It shouldn't be a black back. It should be the stripes extended. And on the home one, the silver stripes are getting a bit of flack on the shoulders, and the silver star as well. And also, with the green hoops, just leave it green. When they start putting all the patterns and all that kind of stuff.
Pattern in it, because I think that one's more bloody, but I think the other one that was doing the rounds this morning is slightly different. It's like there's like many triangles in it, and I just don't know why you try to overcomplicate something that is literally the most basic strip and the most beautiful strip, and just don't try and be a bit edgy.
Absolutely. I mean, see if you go to the kind of early 80s, right, and you look at the Umbro jersey with a V-neck. If we're going to go for a V-neck, it was quite a bold V-neck, no frills, nothing on it, green and white hoops, simple as you like. There's your kit. It's a classic. Stick the Adidas logo on it, and it will sell by the bucket load. But there you go. They don't listen to us, Amy. Well, fan engagement when it comes to things like that, you're going to sell the fans it. Why not ask them what they want? And I think, at some point they're going to realise that, or they're going to keep ending up with pink and silver away jerseys. Now, the new fixtures were announced last week. I was asked to speak about them, and I went through to Celtic Park, which was a great experience, Amy.
I didn't see that.
Did you not?
No, not.
I'll send you the link. No, I know. It kind of went under the radar. These things often do. I'll tell you what, it probably would have even been worse or better. Probably better. The trophy was meant to be coming as well, and I'd have been standing next to the trophy, but it was late, which was unfortunate. But we were there to talk about, obviously, the new season. You've already made one of the points that I think is huge. We do not have any qualifiers to play in Europe for the first time in a long, long time. How big is that going to be for our preparations, Amy?
Oh, it's huge. Absolutely. It's just, like, your season just starts at a more regular time, really. Not starting in some mental European country that, none of us have ever travelled to on like the 4th of July kind of thing. So it's, it's nice just to have as long a pre-season, really, actually, is what Ange wants. Obviously, it's still right now quite early days, and but you are starting to see players gradually kind of filter back. But yeah, that's all that Ange could have wished for. He said, last season that, well, look what managed to do last season, actually. Just even look at that, and that was with the worst kind of circumstances ever, and you hope that he'll, and no manager at Celtic will ever have to, walk into something like that every game. But yeah, just he's already, building in the backroom team as well, very impressively, setting his plans out kind of clearly to the fans with the B team as well. Everything's gradually just shaping up. Nothing seeming too rushed. Harry Kewell was obviously uttered a wee while ago, even maybe just 10, 15 days ago, and now it's been announced. So it's just, like I say, just not rushing, just taking it nice and slowly. And then when pre-season can start, it's even knowing that that's it, because if the mood at the start of the season, at the start of the league season, that is, it's not going to be hampered by a poor European home or away defeat, really. There's not that the travelling. It's just basically as clean a slate as you could ask for, and I think that's pretty ideal to what Ange wants to really impose.
I think it seems like an obvious question, how big an advantage is it? But Celtic had got into the habit of playing these qualifiers. And my biggest issue with that was I just never felt prepared. I never felt that you could possibly go into a pre-season, Amy, and do all your work in the pre-season for those qualifiers. All your work in terms of recruitment should have been done in January. And it was a short-termism, and I mentioned this last week, bringing in players that you didn't really intend on keeping beyond the end of the season. And that's why I had an issue with how we were using the loan deals before. Your Charlie Musondas and Ollie Burke, who we've already spoken about, and Jullien, and all these guys who you didn't really intend on keeping beyond the end of the season. So it wasn't benefiting the qualifiers, which inevitably we would be involved in. So thankfully we're not. And you were also talking, harking back to last season, what Ange walked into. And I think often it's interesting to have a look at that first lineup against Midtjylland. So let's do that. Barkas was in goals. Tony Ralston at right back, the only right back at the club at the time. Greg Taylor at left back, with Beaton and Welsh at centre half. That's huge. Beaton and Welsh at centre half, Amy. Your three midfielders were Turnbull, Sorrow and McGregor. And up top, Abada, Edouard and Christie. So, and by the way, we almost got through that. Even with a sending off to Beaton, bringing in Dane Murray, dropping back, we almost got through. We took them to extra time away from home. Sviatchenko marked Edouard out the game, which I found absurd. I mean, we knew as much about Sviatchenko as he knew about Edouard. We should have been able to combat that. We didn't. It wasn't Ange's fault. But we're not going to be going into a game as hamstrung as that. And that's huge. That's massive for our preparations. I guess we don't know until the draw's made. We don't know until the games are played. But at least we're giving ourselves the best possible chance that we can. Now, the other big thing I thought was blatantly obvious for football fans, surely the champions, and unfurling that flag is a showpiece of any first fixture weekend. Why on earth are we playing on a Sunday? I know the obvious answer is the telly, but I mean, surely the champs should be opening the weekend up with with a fixture at least at 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm a bit traditional. It's kind of that straightforward. If you're unfurling the flag, it's signal the start of the league season. It's not really the start of the league season if the boys have already played yesterday. Do you know what I mean? I just find that it's not that hard to try and get these things right. I think, to be honest, only Scottish football could really continually muck that up. And I think it shows as well, rightly as you say, the only reason that's happening is obviously for the TV deals. And it's even a TV deal that didn't even really actually care about Scottish football. So I think to pander to them, it's just, I think it's just laughable as well now, isn't it? But you just come to expect it. But I find it so odd. It's just so straightforward. If you are unfurling the flag, you kind of kick the season off, not already have 4 games played or whatever. So, it's a strange one, but you just have to probably take it with a pinch of salt and laugh, because I bet actually most of us, probably on Thursday, if you said, well, Celtic start the season, you'd probably say no.
The thing is, again, I always think about travelling fans as in travelling to see Celtic.
Yeah.
So those coming over from Ireland in particular, and there's never any thought given to travel plans or anything like that. When they're changing it, absolutely no thought given. The one, I guess by the time we play our game, Livingston might have got a result at the Tony Macaroni, so we'll see what happens there. There was a run of fixtures that I found quite interesting. When we come back from the break, obviously there's international football in December. We come back, we play Aberdeen away, St Johnstone at home, Hibs away, Rangers away, which is the traditional New Year's derby. And I think that was the one that kind of sprung out at me. I thought, Potentially, that's a tough run of games, other than St Johnstone, unless they return to the form of 2 seasons ago. That's potentially a tough run of games leading up to the second derby game at New Year. So we'll see how that goes as well. There's a good few points coming in. You mentioned that obviously my chat last week had gone under the radar. Thank you to everybody actually for getting in touch normally on a private basis, email, DM, and also on Twitter. I've got some lovely messages from people who I think have a Celtic state of mind, actually. So thanks, everybody. They don't go unnoticed, and I do get round to answering everybody individually. Paul McLean, big names. Who are the big names, apart from McGregor, who had been there before last season? I think that's a good point by Paul, right? Because
I think that's a great point, by the way. Like, when I was talking, I was thinking, oh, actually, mate, that's the reason. The fact that, like, Ange brought all the big players in only last season.
Yeah.
I think it's a fantastic point. I really do.
So it's a staggered thing, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's clubs out there interested. They can't have... it couldn't have gone unnoticed, you know, the impact of Kyogo, the impact of O'Reilly, to name but 2, right? But I mean, obviously there's other players in there who have done so well, and there's always interest in Celtic players, but it may well be more of an issue, particularly if we do well in the Champions League this time next season. And that's when we get down to that nitty-gritty and we come up against the kind of challenges that previous managers have faced, right back to Brendan Rodgers. Like I say, it was 5 years ago that we went through a pre-season and didn't sell a supposed big name. So, Paul, it's a good point. These big names might just be at the start of the Celtic cycle, and you know, it could well be further down the line that we start getting a wee bit concerned about the vultures circling Celtic Park. I don't want to think about that at the moment. Every time I look at any news reports, any news sources, any of the Celtic news coming out, there are new players getting mentioned every single day. You could probably do a transfer roundup every single day on the bulletin, Amy, and just focus on the guys getting a mention. But what I will say, I don't want to keep harking back to Friday, because obviously it resulted in a wee bit of flack on Friday night, which wasn't very nice. However, see, when we drove up to Celtic Park on Friday, right, and this is true, there was somebody at the front of the park coming out the front door, and they were obviously with their family, right? So there was maybe 4 or 5 of them. And I says to Stuart, who I was with, I said, that looks like a player, right? Not one of our players, it's got to be said. Someone who's been in the stadium, maybe been shown around and all that kind of stuff. And he jumps in a black Range Rover and he drives away. And I was thinking to myself, you know, I've just maybe not got that instinct of a red top hack, because I'm not one, that I would have tried to get a picture or maybe even made my way up to try and figure out who it was. But there was definitely somebody coming out of Celtic Park with their family. And I supposed at that time that perhaps it was a new signing, perhaps we were showing them around. And then I seen something on Celtic Underground on Twitter actually saying that somebody had been shown around the park. So it could well be one and the same. And now I'm kicking myself because I never tried to figure out who it was.
Did you not take hair colour, height, anything like this?
Very generic, yes, very generic. But I was looking at some of the players who had been linked to the club, and I don't know how realistic it is that one of these guys will have been at Celtic Park. But Stephen O'Day, the 24-year-old Nigerian centre forward who is plying his trade with Randers, I've looked at pictures today, possibly. Alexander Bernabe, the guy who obviously has been in the news because he got sent off for sticking the head in someone.
Definitely not him.
It wasn't him. Alpha Semedo, no, it wasn't him. Benjamin Siegrist, no, because we know he's about 7 feet tall and what he looks like. It wasn't Ko Itakura, and Vinny Souza, possibly. But again, I don't want to throw that out and start rumours. But there was definitely somebody leaving the front door. And then I looked at that Celtic rumours site, Celtic Underground, and I thought, oh, wait a minute. I should have been on the ball. I probably would have walked past them and, you know what I mean, just said, all right, mate. And that would have been it. And then I'd have been scouring Google to try and find the player that I've just missed an exclusive scoop. But I reckon talking about players in, we could go through all the guys I've mentioned and the other 20 players who've been linked. Interesting enough, Itakura looks like it's the deal is going to be elsewhere. Mönchengladbach are interested. But I think the big question is around Jota. And not just will he, won't he, because obviously we don't know. And we're looking at all the wee scraps that we can get. I know that Anthony Joseph's shared a wee bit recently on where we are with that deal. If we get the deal done, though, and this is something, again, going back to one of the points I made earlier, Amy, right? Maybe in the past, if we brought 2 players in permanently and 3 on loan, we might have thought that's a bit of a cop-out. The board aren't really backing the gaffer. Why are we not buying these guys in on loan? However, I think that's all changed in the last year because of the way we've been using the loan deal. So, bear with me on this one. Last season, we bring in Jota, Maeda, Carter-Vickers. All 3 of them, you would bite your hand off to keep them permanently. Thankfully, we've got 2 out of 3 at the moment. You take the third every day of the week. If we only manage to get Jota and CCV in on permanent deals, plus 3 loans, and there's no guarantee, of course, Amy, that they're going to be of the same level or, as successful as the 3 we got in last year. Do you think we'd be happy with that as Celtic supporters? Would you be happy with that? Would you be wanting more? Do you think that's not enough investment to go into the Champions League?
3 loan deals and just the 2 signings?
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Or is that borderline? Is that like the absolute bare minimum that we should be looking at?
I think that's proper bare minimum. I really do. I don't think I would be... Oh, yeah. God, that's a tough... I don't think I would be... I don't want to say disappointed. Oh, maybe disappointed rather than... Maybe disappointed is the word. I just don't think it's enough. I don't think that's enough. The 3 loan deals... Because... Yeah, it worked last season, and I'm not saying that like it wouldn't work again, but it is a huge risk to take. And I think that there are areas where I would like a more permanent deal kind of struck. And I think even with Jota and Carter-Vickers, I still think there's more than even if they were loan deals, I still think there's more than 3 players or 3 positions needed around the squad for depth. So yeah. Now that I've definitely thought it through, no, I don't think I would be like content with that. No,
I think I've said in the past, Jota, Carter-Vickers, get them in, and then we're looking for a goalkeeper as backup, left back, defensive mid, and I still think we need a striker.
I still say another centre half. Yeah,
we'll talk about Jullien, by the way, because obviously there's been a bit of chat around Jullien because he's deciding he wants to stay. I'm pretty sure Ange makes that decision, mate, but we'll talk about that. Paddy Lavery, hang my head in shame. I was so, concentrating on the job in hand, right? And you know what it's like, Amy, you can only do one thing at once while someone else can. And this thing happened, and I was like, right, I should maybe know who that is, but I missed the opportunity. And as someone says, I'll bring you back up, Jungle Lion, as Johnny Ryan says, too late, the rumours have already started. Absolutely, and it's not because I'm trying to be in the know. I'm showing you how ridiculously not in the know that I am. Even when presented with an open goal, I've scalped it over the bar. Jungle Lion, I love to go back just to the numbers on the shots. Pay the fine like the old days. You know what, Jungle Lion? I love the old shots. I absolutely love them. I'm looking at a pair of them right now. We've got a number 7 pair in the studio. And I love them. And by the way, interestingly enough, the shots have an inside pocket. Answers on a postcard. What do you need as a footballer to be putting on your inside pocket? Is it your false teeth? I don't know. Is it your cigarettes? I don't know. Right, back in the day, I know they used to like a smoke at half time. But anyway, the numbered shots probably won't be reintroduced because of all the regulations, etc., etc. But why on earth has a club never released the full range 1 to 11 and the big white shorts with the big green numbers? You would see them all over Europe on holiday, Amy. You would. Simple as that. Come on.
Absolutely. Easy.
Get that on the marketing team's to-do list for sure. But yeah, I love the old shorts. Who do I think it was? I'm not actually sure. I've got to say, I could guess, right, and start a rumour and pretend that I'm in the know. But as I say, I'm ridiculously not in the know because even when they're a few feet away from me, mate, I can't tell you who it was. But it was definitely there for sure. You mentioned earlier, Ange Postecoglou's doing moves or making moves behind the scenes, and I've been very impressed with that because when the name Harry Kewell first popped up, we did ask the question a week or two back, what does this mean for the existing coaching staff? And I think in particular we mentioned Stephen McManus because he was kind of like last to the table. He was the last in. And the way that Ange has explained that and the fact that he's actually now seen McManus as almost like a bridge between the B team and the first team is I don't know if it was by design, but it was a bit of genius, the way that Ange has explained how McManus is going back to the B team, but he now knows what is required in the first team, and he can start that filtering process from the B through to the first. What do you think of that, and what do you think of the Kuehl appointment as well?
I think it's so, it's just the way that Ange described it, I think it's so respectable towards Stephen McManus, and I think it's, even if you originally maybe weren't a fan of it, I think then you've just got to tip your cap, because he's managing to sell why that's the right thing to do, pushing him back, and not even pushing him back, like, just because it's not even like a step back. You're saying how integral that he is. And he probably will, or you certainly hope that he'll become one of the most integral cogs, because it's been one of the biggest disappointments for me this season. And, I've never had the fact that I don't like the B side. And one of the reasons why I don't think that it works is because we've not seen, other than really Owen Moffat, you've not seen that kind of pathway anywhere that, was kind of promised. So with Stephen McManus now, hopefully going to set up the B side in the way that Ange would want, in the way that if they're going to make any kind of transition to the first team the way that they need to play, then I think that's a win-win for everyone. And then potentially from a Celtic perspective, then I could feel a lot more comfortable with why the B side are in the lower league, and think that they're actually getting something out of the experience, other than this season when I don't really see any progression. Because, like you say, when I've seen Celtic, they've set up the same as the first team, but there's been nothing. And I know you're not going to absolutely replicate, but it's got to be like that they're playing in the way that if they were to go into the first team, that the role would not be totally unknown to them. So I think it's a total masterclass, really, to shift McManus back, and it shows, like I said, how highly he regards Stephen McManus, and then to bring in someone like Harry Kuehl, like, oh my God, I know perhaps his actual managerial career's not been the best, but if you're bringing in a guy with that much football knowledge, experience, genuinely, the term legend's obviously extremely overused, but there's no two ways about it. The guy's an Australian footballing legend. And to bring him in, even if the managerial stuff's maybe not at the highest standard, he's still been a coach for many a year. Just if you've got that kind of backlog of the career that he has had, it's only going to be, one assumes, going to be so impactful just to even the younger players as well, that this is a proper player here, and he's going to try and impose some of his wisdom. I think that's a really, really top class signing. And again, it just adds to that. We spoke so much last year that Ange wasn't too fussed about not bringing in his own backroom staff, and to do so now, and to make such a timely, a timely move, a timely signing, and not even just like for the sake of it kind of thing, that this is a proper name and a proper guy. Obviously he respects, and there is that mutual respect as well, which is crucial. So I think it's just, probably went under the radar a little bit, just the whole movements in and out, but those changes, I think they're going to be absolutely magnificent for the club.
It's like you say, it's been seamless as well. It's not as though for weeks and months we've heard rumours of Kuehl coming in and bolstering the backroom staff. It just happened, and that seems to be the way with Ange, doesn't it? It's like, if he wants a deal done, it's done, and it's all done kind of in-house and on the quiet, unless there's somebody like me hanging about outside looking for people visiting the stadium, and even then I can't identify who it is. So you're absolutely, you're safe if it's me that's meant to be doing the detective work. But Harry Kuehl comes in, and he's got that profile, like you say. So when you're talking, let's say, have we tapped into the Australian market yet? Is that something that is on the radar as well? And you've got two Australian football legends, and that word is the correct word when it comes to what the guys have done in terms of Australia and as Australian sportsmen. So I think that's huge as well. And it wouldn't surprise me if McManus already knew that the reason he was in last season was because Ange had plans maybe to bolster it in the pre-season. You're coming in, you're going to get that experience, and they're going to put you back to the B team. So I don't think it will come as a surprise to Stephen McManus that has that course of action has been taken as well. But just to let everybody know, if they don't already know, Amy, you do have a good knowledge of the Lowland League, having been working on media duties for Bonnyrigg Rose last season, and you got an opportunity to see the kind of standard that Celtic had at B level. You've told me privately, mentioned it a couple of times, you weren't overly impressed actually with how they set up and how they performed. Was there anyone within that team that you saw that you think, right, that maybe the time isn't now, but they are definitely earmarked for the future, that you think will make that progression to the first team?
I think consistently when I saw, again, and it probably because of the age, I would say this a few years, but I was really, really impressed by Kenzie Carse. Really impressed by him. Just felt that he operated quite well, always wanted to be on the ball, like really always showing for the ball, and there was a lot of intent. So I think he was probably the star for me. Summers as well, was really impressed by him. But when Rose played Celtic, it was at the start of the season, and then it was like first game of the season. So it was just, even that side was still, you can't really take an awful lot from that, because it was just so many of the boys, I think, were Celtic in Wales at the time. I think Ange took them down to Wales for pre-season for a bit, and they took say maybe 9 or 10 of the B players. So that it was a very young side. I've told you before as well, I've always been really impressed by Rocco Vata. Like really impressed, and yeah, he's young, but I wouldn't be surprised. Like I really wouldn't, because I don't think age should be a barrier in the first side. And for me, I was really, really impressed by him. And then at the back, obviously Dane Murray and Bosun Law as well. I think there are big expectations for both. You really have to hope that this injury that Dane Murray picked up towards the end of the season is not too hindering towards his career. And Bosun Law's another one really who's actually had the injuries this season. But when I've been really impressed by his physique and by his reading of the game when stepping in, know when to sit. And I have been impressed by that, to be fair. So individually there's been a few, but I don't know, there was just, they didn't look, especially in January, played Celtic at the end of January, and it just didn't not look like there was a lot of cohesion, and I think that was quite worrying. And it's just, it's not like that they're all just randomly chucked together now. This is everything that is whole point of the B, them playing week in, week out, is that, it's all part of the training, and it is like proper, like this, you are the B team. Not just reserves who maybe play once every 6 weeks or whatever kind of thing. This is a regular thing. And I would say that was probably the most disappointing thing. That was just, and I know it's not all going to come together in a blink of an eye, but you would be thinking by after January that things would be a little bit more apparent, that something was ticking over. And certainly then I personally didn't see it, but maybe that's me being too harsh. But I think I had big expectations because, at the end of the day, as much as I've not been a huge fan of the B side, purely just because of what I know of the Lowland League, I'm still wanting to see good, great Celtic youngsters coming through, and that's just not what I saw at all.
I've got a kind of a two-part question for you here, right? Because Celtic last season, because it was obviously a new thing, we'd just been introduced to that level within the pyramid system of Scottish football. Celtic, through their financial kind of muscle at the B team to a degree, and we've gone out and we've bought players, Amy, specifically for the B team, right? So maybe that means we weren't ready. We didn't. So we've got Johnny Kenny, 125k. I think Joey Dawson was closer to 300k from Scunthorpe, and then Bosun Lawal from Watford was another 120. So you think to yourself, well, there's about £500,000 of an investment in players thrown in to that league. As a Bonnyrigg Rose media
slant
observer, commentator, fan, / how did that make you feel? Because it almost felt, from the outside looking in, because I haven't had a great involvement with the B team, I've seen them a few times, that it was almost as if you're just throwing money at it and I don't think it necessarily worked. But from your perspective, that's the first part. And secondly, how satisfying was it that you won the league anyway, even when a team
Oh,
spent £500,000?
so satisfying, so satisfying. You know, like you say, both Celtic and Rangers are chucking money at it. It's disappointing. There's no two ways about it. Because the whole point, the way that the B sides sold it to the Lowland League clubs was that, you know, this is just, the whole point was it was meant to help the Scottish international scene as well, which is just a load of rubbish, to be honest. Because you're looking at, right, so Celtic, Scotland played Denmark in the 21s last week. So under 21s level, that's where you should be having these B-sided players. Not a single one. You know, Stephen Welsh is in the starting lineup, and that's his last 21s cap. It's the same with the Rangers. You know, Leon King and Alex Lowry, two really decent talents, Alex Lowry in particular. And you know, I know many fans who want him in the first team, but he's not even starting for Scotland 21. So the whole point was that it was meant to improve the international scene, and that was kind of the way that they sold it. So it was meant to be the homegrown players and all of this sort of stuff, and then you're watching Celtic and Rangers, like say, pull in players for 125 grand, 300 grand or whatever, and you know, Bollington broke the bank for a striker, and it was, I can't even do the maths, and I don't want to say what it was, but minuscule of that, put it that way. And it's just not on, to be honest. So I was extremely satisfied when Burnley went on to win the league, and yeah, it's Celtic and Rangers, they don't care, you know, they can win the league, but you're never going to get that promotion anyway, so it doesn't really matter. And I think that's another thing that I spoke to you about after the Celtic game as well. That so afterwards I was speaking to Tommy, so walk through and you're watching all the players come in the dressing room, speaking to Tommy McIntyre, speaking to Toss as well, and you're just watching all the players walk. So they've just been beat 2-1, and it's pretty much that win pretty much sealed that Bonnerick were in pretty much in the playoffs. Not mathematically, but it was kind of, you just went, you know. And it was that attitude to all the players. So they were 1-0 up against Rose, and then Bonnerick got an equaliser and a winner before half time still. And in second half, Rose absolutely destroyed them. And it was just the attitude of the players coming out afterwards. And I'm like, you've still just been beat, but it's just a laugh to use. And I remember saying at the time on the show, and I've said it to you quite a lot, and I was just like, you've still been beat. You know, that's not the attitude that I would want to see in a Celtic player, because it doesn't matter if this is the Lowland League or not. If you're trying to sell that, and at the same time, Tommy McIntyre is telling me how much that he loved it, and he thought that this has been a great, you know, thing for the boys, and that they were very keen at that point to try and make this more than a one season thing, and obviously that has came to fruition. And then you're just watching these guys like bounce out with like eating whatever they're eating, and like, I don't know, it's maybe only like a sandwich or something like that, but just laughing and joking, and I was just like, totally away from Rose, but as a Celtic fan, and I'm just, that's not what I would want. Well, put it this way, it wouldn't be acceptable in the first team, and you're meant to be operating like the first team. You're still operating with a Celtic shirt on, and I was really, really unimpressed by that, and I didn't like it at all, because I'm just, you know, you're buying into this as a fan, and I'm like, you're not even fussed at all. And I know that's only what I saw, and you know what happens in the changing room can be very different. But that tiny walk out from the changing room and then into the car park, which is tiny, I was just not a fan of that at all. Bouncing about, sliders, AirPods on, then music blaring, and I'm like, you have been beaten. You've been beaten. Go and show something. Doesn't matter that it's Bonnerick, doesn't matter that it should hurt more that it's the league leaders.
Absolutely.
Because you want to go out and you should want to win more and prove it. You're on massive wages, and half of these guys have done a shift that morning, and that was really, that was the biggest thing for me, was the attitude right afterwards.
It's interesting that, because for me, and again, this is no disrespect, because they're doing extremely well to be at that level, but at that level, in terms of being a Celtic player, you've not made it yet. And I always think about something Tommy Burns said, and it was in one of the old videos that eventually we'll cover on the retrospective on the channel, Return to Paradise it was called, and he was talking about making it. What does that mean to make it at Celtic? And he always said, you know, making it isn't getting in the first team and playing a few games. You know, you've actually got to make it, and there's got to be a sustained period of performance. And I think some people might think they've made it already, Amy. That's what it sounds like there.
Yep.
And it's interesting that is your observation. Tony Cassidy reckons that Itakura is already done. He's away to Gladbach. I thought, the minute that team was mentioned, and the transfer fees, to be fair, we were kind of out of the running. But it's interesting. We were interested in such a high calibre player because there's no doubt he's a quality player. Gary Melrose, PJD, I suspect will have to be happy. The agents are at it again, using Celtic approaches to advertise our clients. Yeah, that I think is why I'm not focusing on the 20 players a week that we could probably go through, to be honest with you, because you just know, Gary, that a lot of the time it's just they're playing the game, aren't they? The agents, they're chucking Celtic's name in the mix to try and get things moving. Brian Degnan, we'll be seeing Brian on Wednesday. If the loans have options to buy, that may be different. I totally agree with that. The short-termism of so many of these previous loan deals was frustrating as a fan, because you're thinking, how can you build anything when they're just coming and dipping their toe in for 4 or 5 months and away back to their parent club? Robert, and saying that they're driven John Joe Kennedy's parent club. Robert Hyland, negligent if we don't bring in a permanent left back. And I think many of the players that were being linked to is certainly the left back position. You mentioned Chris Jullien earlier on, so let's have a wee talk about Chris. One appearance last season. We hadn't seen him since the previous November, where he collided with the post against Dundee United. But apparently, and I never seen any direct quotes, Amy, so I was a wee bit dubious about this one. But apparently, he is ready to stay and fight for his place. That is the word that appeared in the press over the last week or so. Meanwhile, Carol Starfelt, with his top off, is training in the beach on the beach in the sand. First question for you. I'm not asking you about Carol Starfelt with his top off. Would a fully fit Chris Jullien displace CCV or Starfelt anyway? And I'm talking a fully fit Chris Jullien. Would he get in that side?
Oh, what does a fully fit Chris Jullien look like? It's been that long. I would say at this stage, no. And I don't know how much of that is still being persuaded by his comments. I'm trying to not include it, but I think it's pretty impossible. I also think, with like you, that you think you've got to say apparently, very much so. I've not seen any real clarity on the comments, but he's got to come out and say that, doesn't he? And I think his time at Celtic's done. I was really keen for him, really liked him when he first came in, and was really impressed by everything that he could show. And I think if he hadn't said what he said, I probably would have been inclined to say that he could get in ahead of Carl Starfelt. But I think that's then also just being too disrespectful to Starfelt, because he's worked through unbelievable hate actually from the Celtic fan base. Not always been his biggest fan myself, and I think maybe that's why I am saying maybe Jullien. But I think he's not done an awful lot wrong. He has made mistakes, no two ways about that. I don't think you can paper over those cracks, but I think that Starfelt and Carter Vickers are just showing something a little bit different than what Jullien didn't. And I think his time at the club is done. And there is a sadness about it, because I do think that he really could have been a player, but along with the injuries and just I think more than anything, it's just the manner in which he's went about things recently. It just overweighs everything, really.
I think, actually, right, two completely different players, certainly two completely different sizes. But see, when you look at Jullien and Dembele, their injuries effectively finished their Celtic career, not their football career. Dembele will go and get a side potentially in Serie A. Jullien, I'm sure, at 29 will still get a decent side, probably back in his homeland. But those two injuries, the ankle break you're talking about down in Wales, that Dembele suffered down there, and of course the knee injury that Jullien suffered, they just never ever got back into the fold. And I mean, at the end of last season, Amy, he's playing fourth fiddle to Stephen Welsh. Stephen Welsh was the third choice. Jullien was kind of nowhere to be seen, and often not even on the bench. But I think one thing we've learned from Ange Postecoglou is that he'll be making a decision. It won't be Chris Jullien that makes the decision at the end of the day. Jungle Lion does make a good point. Jullien has to say he's staying fighting for his place, because no one will touch him. Otherwise, I mean, this is it. I mean, people must be looking at that, football clubs must be looking at that and thinking, right, he's a risk. Yeah, they can put him through his medical, but he's had very, very little football in the last 18 months. He is a massive risk for any club taking him on. But thank you, everybody, for your comments. It's been a quick hour chatting away to Amy about Celtic and, of course, Bonnie Rose. And if you are watching us on YouTube, because that is where we're actually putting it out, that's where we're broadcasting it, this week at least anyway, we'll see how that goes, then make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Give us a wee thumbs up on the video as well. And if you do want to support Acsom a wee bit further, we do have some merch, and the link to that merch is underneath the video. Look at all the beautiful Shamrock jerseys you could actually own. Get on the website, link underneath the video, and you can get them within the next couple of days. And also there's a book in there, which is the Henrik Larsson book, which Kev Graham wrote. The only book in the world written about Henrik Larsson using the art of poetry. So well done, Kevin Graham, but you can buy that as well. Thanks everybody for getting involved again with the Acsom bulletin on a Monday. It's been an absolute pleasure, and all that's left for me to say is, Amy Canavan, thanks for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.